You're listening to episode 235 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Gerry Stribling joins us to speak about his book, Buddhism for Dudes, a Jarhead's Field Guide to Mindfulness. We've heard a lot lately from the McCritics of mindfulness, fear-mongering with a willful ignorance about teaching mindfulness in the military. These transparently agenda-laden accusations about mindful snipers are conspicuously absent of evidence and devoid of any recognition that active duty and military veterans are also people, deserving the same opportunities to extinguish suffering as any other human being. Also absent is an equally fearful cry of the Buddhist tradition in the military, despite a much more checkered past when coupled with nationalism, for example in Japan. The fact remains that both non-traditional mindfulness and Buddhist tradition are available to military personnel. And this is a particular environment requiring contextualization, speaking the same language as those who serve. Gerry Stribling is a former Marine and social services professional and former resident of Sri Bodhiraja Temple in Sri Lanka. Stribling and his wife live in Louisville, Kentucky. So sit back, relax, and have a nice Jarhead fresh tea. Our guest today is Gerry Stribling. Gerry, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ted. Thanks for having me.
So glad to be speaking with you. And before we even get started, I want to extend a special thanks to our dear friend and supporter, Linda Blanchard, who's been really one of our greatest assets as we grow secular Buddhism. Thank you so much, Linda, for that. I appreciate it.
That's great to hear because she's been a real asset to me as well.
So, Gerry, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background.
Well, I was born in an Army camp, Fort Riley, Kansas, and I was raised in a military family. My father was a low-level non-commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. My mother had served during World War II in the WACs, and my father was a career soldier, so he didn't get out of the military until 1970, right after I graduated from high school. So that's my culture. That's what I was raised in. And when people can get negative ideas about what that might have been like, but it was really it was almost idyllic. It was socialistic. Everybody's dad, we didn't have to ask what your dad did for a living. We all knew what your dad did for a living. The schools were great. We had everything we wanted except for money. I remember when my dad was making less than $2,500 a year, and that was in the 1960s. But it didn't matter. We had a hospital to go to whenever we got sick. We had the commissary. We could buy food at discounted rates, and it was idyllic. The nicest thing about it was all the travel. I lived all through the Midwest and the American South, and on the Eastern Seaboard, we spent 2 tours of duty in Germany. That was terrific. I thought it was a terrific way to grow up. I would not have traded those experiences for anything. I just think it was an ideal way to grow up. My dad went to Vietnam in 1968, which thrust me into the world of civilian life for the first time in my life. I had to go to a civilian high school, my last year of high school. And if that wasn't jarring enough, I guess I went to the University of Kentucky for a little while and wasn't doing very well. So as much as I wanted a college education, I wasn't ready to get one yet. So I joined the military in order to get the GI Bill. I did not go in with any sort of illusion about what that life was going to be like. I grew up in that life. But the carrot at the end of the stick was the GI Bill. And the GI Bill put me all the way through a master's program. Once I got out of the service, I would not have been able to get an education otherwise. I have no idea what I would be had it not been for those opportunities that the U.S. government provided me as a result of my service in the Marine Corps. Early on, I knew from a Buddhist perspective, in retrospect, I've always had this great streak of altruism running through me, and ever since I was a teenager, I sort of sought out ways to help people and had the opportunity to do that. Most of my adult career, very fortunately, even on a volunteer basis when it was necessary to do so. And that carried me into education first, and then when I was 40, I switched careers and found the passion of my life, which was residential rehabilitation case management in social services. I work with various populations from severe disabilities to mental illness. I work with prisoners. I work with veterans. I work with the homeless. I worked with Burmese refugees, all in the capacity of I'm going to be the one hub guy. I'm going to be able to get this stuff done on your behalf because you can let me know what you need, and I'm going to help coordinate all that and make it into a unity, into a whole. It was a very successful model that I used for 20 years. I found that work to be very, very fulfilling. I left out a whole section of my life, which had to do with wilderness travel afoot. I did a lot of backpacking in my 30s. I hiked a significant section of the Appalachian Trail when I was 29. Hiked all over the country. That was very, very important to me. Little did I know later when I formally studied Buddhism that those were the great meditative experiences of my life. Three months afoot alone is going to get you way, way, way into your head. So all that was there. Kosovo, back in the 1990s, I was working for an organization called 7 County Services, and we did rehabilitation case management for folks with mental disabilities and with mental health issues. And after the Kosovo thing ended, the hostilities, and the Kosovars repatriated their part of the former Yugoslavia, they left many of their mentally retarded and seriously mentally ill family members back in Montenegro. And I'm thinking, this is a very unique crisis. It just happens to be something that I know a lot about at that stage. And I still feel guilty about not going over there and helping with that, because that's basically where my whole head was at throughout the 1990s. I was teaching kindergarten at a Hasidic Jewish Hebrew day school. I was the secular teacher. And I had my kids out on the playground, and they're all running around on September 11th, 2001, and the principal of the school came out and informed me what had happened in New York City. And I knew at that second that I have the wherewithal, I have the independence, I have the opportunity to go and help in the world's worst crisis at the time. So I volunteered to go to the Pakistani-Afghani border region to help set up schools for the inevitable Afghani refugee children that would be displaced as a result of our invasion. But that didn't work out. Too many Americans were getting their heads lopped off. So I figured, there's plenty of other places in Asia where they could use my talents. So I volunteered with an organization called the Millennium Elephant Foundation in a little village called Randania, Sri Lanka, where I helped set up 3 English language learning centers in this jungle region, working out of Buddhist temples. Little did I know when I went to Sri Lanka in 2002 that I would fall into the laps of some of the more eminent Buddhist theologians, monks, thinkers in the country. The summer after that, based on the work that I'd done in Sri Lanka, I was supposed to go to China with the UN, but that was the summer of SARS. So I ended up back in Sri Lanka.
Now, had that been your first introduction to Buddhism, that first trip to Sri Lanka?
My first formal introduction to Buddhism, yeah. Initially met up with a monk. He was like, I call him a Yoda-like figure. He really was. He was tall and old and had this impish grin, and they call him the monk with hairy ears for obvious reasons. His name was P. Marakana, and I spent afternoons with him at his temple. After school, I would take the 3-wheeler ride to his temple, and I would sit on his veranda, and we would question and answer each other. And it was quite stimulating. He gave me more of a, not so much of a structured introduction to Buddhism, like the formal studying of the Dharma. More like I asked him once early on in our relationship. I asked him, it's my understanding that Buddhism discourages attachment. I said, I have a wife that I adore. I have got 2 wonderful children. I'm very attached to them. So there's a conflict there, obviously, Bhante. Well, how should I think about this? And he had this smile on his face, and he says, well, the life that you're living as a householder, being married and having children and contributing to your community, those are Buddhist ideals. He said, these are all very good things. And then he said something that just blew my mind. He knew I had worked in social work and various sorts of altruistic endeavors, and he says, your relationship with your family is practice for your relationship to everybody else in the rest of your life. You consider yourself a compassionate man. You can judge, you can measure your capacity for compassion based on the compassion that you feel towards your wife. I will never love anybody more than her. And that was a real liberating thing to hear. I thought. I thought it was just a remarkable thing to say. It's really what I took home with me.
It made it very personal for you, your
It
own sense of personal compassion.
it did. You know, I do the sorts of things that I do, and I've got a number of new projects going on I might have to tell you about later because it makes me happy. I tell people that I'm a selfish man. I have a hospice patient right now who he's just, I love cantankerous people. He is the most irascible human being I ever want to meet. And he says, I can't believe that not only do you do what you do, but you do it for free. He says, you couldn't pay me $1,000 an hour to do what you do. And I looked at him and I says, dude, I'm happy to be here. This makes me really happy, unbelievably happy. I think that I'm a selfish guy because I kind of hog these opportunities. And then the second summer I went and I actually lived at Sri Bodhiraja Temple in southern Sri Lanka, far southern Sri Lanka, in a town called Imbilapitiya, which is, it will take you a month to learn how to spell it. But it was there that I got to study under a relatively famous or infamous monk today. You might have heard of Omalpe Sabitatiro. And also with a man named Lokambundara, who was at the time the country's Minister of Buddhist Sasana and also the Attorney General. I got to spend an incredible evening with him. He was an expert on the Buddhist first sermon, and so I spent a very interesting evening with him. Omalpe Sobita Tirdo's assistant chief priest I brought to the United States in 2008.
So tell us about how this grew into your decision to write this book. What's that story? How did that happen?
Well, I've always fancied myself a writer. I'm a hack magazine journalist. Okay, I do mostly I did mostly fluff stuff, and it was a semi-lucrative hobby. But I've always wanted to write. I've always written, and I've generally always published something every year. Mostly stuff in magazines. I'm the author of use of lateral lines as an alternative to septic systems in Barrier Island, North Carolina. Stuff like that. And none of it was very serious, but I've always loved to write. Then after the Sri Lanka experience, I knew I really wanted to write about that. I did a memoir of my time in Sri Lanka, which I keep updating periodically as Sri Lanka falls from one catastrophe to the next, called Kokopelli in Paradise. It hasn't been published. The next thing I wrote was a memoir of the year after I went to Sri Lanka, which I spent, the 3 years afterwards, which I spent operating a program through the Department of Labor called the Incarcerated Veterans Transitional Program. And we did all sorts of cool things through that program. And I forgot the point I was trying to make.
Let me ask, why Kokopelli?
Kokopelli is the Native American. You know who Kokopelli is? He's the hunchback.
I've got a necklace of him playing the flute right now.
Right. He's the hunchback flutist of the Anasazi, and wherever Kokopelli goes, good luck follows. Now, I can go a little farther with that. You're going to love this, I think. I don't know. I was a United States Marine, okay? I had to go through the same kind of killer training that every other Marine ever had to go through in order to become a Marine. And then when I became a Marine, the Marine Corps decided that the very best job for me was to play the piccolo in the band. I was a flutist. And that's what I did. I wish I had $5 for every time I played the piccolo part of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Now, when the book came, when Wisdom decided to publish my book, Buddhism for Dudes, Simon and Schuster, the distributors, they kind of latched on to that whole military thing. And if you go on their site, they introduced the book as a tough former Marine leads Buddha's base camp for the average Joe.
Piccolo playing tough Buddhist.
Yeah, exactly. I had the killer instinct of a Care Bear. But I was still a Marine. I'm still a tough guy, No Marine has ever given me a hassle for playing the piccolo. They kind of
So let's talk about the book itself. And
sure.
Having gone through it, it is for folks who are listening, it is very approachable. It's very down to earth. And if you're new to Buddhist practice and it seems kind of strange for you, you're not quite sure what it's about, it really is. This is Buddhism for Dudes. And not just men, women. It's fine too. Don't get too hung up on that as a title. It's a very approachable book that gives a good introduction to what Buddhism is about for those of us who are not going to shave our heads and live in a monastery or become scholars. Gerry, I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit about what's in there and why you structured it the way you did.
It's a primer on the Four Noble Truths. It's a true introduction to Buddhist thought and practice. There's chapters about practice in there as well as the theory and stuff behind Buddhism. I wanted to write it in the kind of language that I would use on the golf course with the guys that I played golf with in my fishing boat. Really and truly what I had in the back of my mind was, I'm going to write this for military guys. I want to write this for the men and the women who put their lives on the line and could derive and have derived comfort and solace from studying Buddhism and from starting a meditation practice. I wanted to write something as accessible as I possibly could. I didn't dumb anything down. I just used accessible language. I make the point that so much of Buddhist information out there is esoteric or intellectual or academic-based, and or are just swarming with deities and that sort of thing, and it's really hard to get to the meat and potatoes of the issue. I laid that out. I wrote it like I was writing it for guys, which means there's a lot of crude humor in it. But obviously, it was a lot of women read the book. A lot of women love the book. I think Linda's a classic example. She's a great supporter of mine, even though she knows like 30 times more about Buddhism than I could ever hope to learn to know. She's really an amazing person. But if you can't understand my book, then Buddhism just isn't for you. Women read the book all the time. They like it. I made the crack on my TV interview the other day that women love the book because it provides them insight into the simple minds of the men that they married.
Gerry, what are you hoping that people get out of the book, the people reading it? What are you hoping they find there? What
I hope is that people realize, and I wrote it for non-Buddhists, okay? Lots and lots and lots and lots of Buddhists are reading it, and what I'm hoping for is lots and lots and lots of the right Buddhists read it, because I make an important point about the Buddhist concept of anatta in the book, and that Buddhism isn't just what most Americans think it is, a self-help improvement program. That's half of it. The other half is to get out there in the world and in the community and do the very best you can in as compassionate way as you possibly can for the betterment of humanity. That doesn't mean that everybody has to go into an altruistic profession. That's absurd. Most people who work are doing work on behalf of others. They help other people. So I think it's important for people to realize that a lot of what they do in life is compassionate to begin with. So people need to learn how to appreciate that in and of themselves, because Buddhism is all about patting yourself on the back and not having to get your rewards from the environment or from other people. I think is a really important point that I try to make, and that Buddhism is not for the timid. If you want to go out there and make an improvement in the world, you got to be a stand-up guy. You got to be able to stand up for justice and social rights and human rights, and go down to the food bank and help the needy, or write a big fat check whenever the tornado goes through your region. And all of those sorts of things. People have to learn how to appreciate what they do on behalf of other people. I think that's a great part of Buddhism. I don't need anything, you know. My wife pays the bills, and I can run around and do all the nice, good things I possibly can find to do. It's a nice place to be when you're 64 and retired and got fired off your last job.
Let's segue a little bit. I noticed on your site, which we're linking on the episode page for this episode.
Oh, cool.
Your website has a section, What is Secular Buddhism? Of course, that's a topic near and dear to the hearts of the people listening to this. Why does that feature as a main link on your blog?
The thing that people find refuge in the Buddha, in Buddhism, from a variety of different perspectives. You can read the Kalama Sutta two different ways, I think. I find Buddhism to be a wonderful respite and refuge, an island away from all things metaphysical. I can't go there. If I can't see it, hear it, taste it, experience it, I'm going to tend not to believe in its existence until I find out otherwise. That's just an empirical way of looking at life. In so doing, you can face you can face life as a person who requires delusion, requires the belief in something that is greater and bigger and invisible and more powerful than themselves, or you can dispense with that notion from the perspective of, what the heck does anybody know about that? But you can't find, I'm not a real smart guy. But, bring me anybody who can prove to me the existence of any sort of thing, from clairvoyance to the existence of an all-powerful, omniscient, single being. I don't know. The Buddha said that. I don't know. Why are you asking me that? I don't go there. The Buddha didn't go there. Neither do I. I've been, in some of the reviews of my book, they said I've deftly stepped around the metaphysical issues. But I also say, the other way that you can read the Kalama Sutta is something that I say in my book, that if God has touched your life in some way, then that's proof enough that God exists. That's just not part of my purview. And I'm not going to tell people one way or the other what to believe or not to believe. What I am saying is that there is an ethical there's an ethical set of rules that human beings need to live by, and I think that Buddhism articulated them the best and has also made them more attainable. And if you, another thing that I say, and I might be proven wrong toward the end of my life, is if you have to believe in the metaphysics, then you're afraid of death. The only way to lose your fear of death is to lose all hope of life after death. I don't know. I'm sure, 1,000 other people have said that, but but that's where that's my perspective. Why should I care? I deal with dying people all the time. I'm a hospice volunteer. among other things. And I don't need it. I don't see it. I don't see what people have to be afraid of something as natural as death is.
So, Gerry, what do you see as some good ways to help overcome the hurdles in sharing Buddhism with folks like, well, other jarheads?
We don't have to worry about the jarheads so much, I don't think. You would not believe the Buddhist ethics that they teach in Marine Corps training. There's something called the life value, and they teach that during hand-to-hand combat training when you are literally, you could kill somebody with your bare hands. The life value states, in essence, and it's interesting that the police organizations lately have taken on this same ethic. The life value is the absolute value. Any other value is not an absolute value, is a relative value, but the life value is the absolute value. And if you are cast as one of those few people in the world to be the tough guy who makes sure everybody can sleep safely at night by being the rough man willing to do violence on their behalf, that when you're casting the role of taking somebody's life, you're doing it to save the lives of others. They're just enlisted people. They don't start the wars. They don't prosecute the wars. They're just cogs in the machine. But they're human cogs in the machine, and I think that it's important for them to realize that the Dharma is there for them too, and not just for the folks down at the meditation center. I know lots of military folks who are Buddhist, and lots of military veterans who are real tough guys who are Buddhist. And although it may not seem obvious otherwise, there's a lot of overlap between the two, because when you go through, especially combat training, Marine and Army, you're taught that the lives of the men on either side of you are more valuable, far more important than your life. That's how you conduct yourself on the battlefield. Buddhism says, I think, the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that perspective, and I wonder how many people who are very active critics of teaching meditation techniques, mindfulness to the military, have this impression of the soldiers, and they'll use pictures in their talks and that are very aggressive people, when they're maybe not contextualizing, perhaps, as is the case with many soldiers, there's a financial reason they're there. There's no other way out.
Certainly.
Of what they're in, and they're good people, and they're in situations where there is horrible suffering on a level that the person who's being critical has never experienced. Are they not also worthy of compassion and care and this practice?
I certainly think so. I got an email once from Iraq from a first sergeant who was there, and he said, "Thank you for my book." It was available as a Kindle book since 2011. Not this version of it. He said, "Thanks for your book. It helped kept me centered during my last deployment." This is the first sergeant. And that just, you get a statement like that, a little one-sentence thing in the email, and it means more than 500 good reviews and people saying that they liked the book, they thought it was funny, they thought it was cute. It helps people. That was my intention. I'm trying to spread the Dharma the best way I can, and I want to spread the Dharma to the right people the best way I can. I don't care about the Great White Sangha. I work in the ghetto.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. You also do a great deal of work that involves diversity and changing our sanghas, which are quite often very ethnically not diverse, very monochromatic. They're very Caucasian based. You and I are, we're white guys of an age. We are the man. We represent that body.
Yeah, we really
and
are.
Who better than us to push back and say, you know what, this is wrong. We got to change this.
Most Buddhists are upper middle class, white folks. But
say a lot of Western Buddhists are.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry.
A lot of adopted Western Buddhists.
you know what I'm saying. My little temple is about 80% refugee. We've got folks from all over South and Southeast Asia. We have African Americans. We have Hispanics who are starting to come. And the one big celebration there is that it is no doubt the most diverse Sangha in my city. It's led by a Sri Lankan monk, the guy I told you about that I brought back. I've always reveled in that sort of thing, and I think it was my army brat upbringing that set me in that direction. I've always I grew up in a highly integrated environment. The junior NCO quarters in the post segregation United States military. So that was what was natural to me. It was quite a jarring experience to experience civilian life, and found it to be a much more hostile place than I did as a military dependent.
Gerry, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Well, yeah.
Say more.
It's you got to have a summary. When you're doing these. I've been doing little bookstore gigs in the last 3 weeks. It's really been an exciting time. The book's only been out for 3 weeks. And the point that I make in the book is that I'm not trying to turn people into Buddhists. The Dalai Lama says that you don't study Buddhism to become a Buddhist. You study Buddhism to be a better whatever you already are. My contention is that if everybody knows a little Dharma, the world would be a more peaceful place. And I want to make that as palatable and as humorous as I possibly can in order to expose as many people as I can to these wonderful philosophies.
Excellent. Gerry, thank you very much. Our guest today, Gerry Stribling. You can find out more on his WordPress site, which I'll be linking on the episode page for this episode. Gerry, thanks for being here. Really appreciate speaking with you today.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are also linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.